after her husband's death, Lisa and her daughter, Jessica, decided to move to another state. They went to live with a man named John, who did not reveal the true nature of his personality. As time went by, John's abuse and mistreatment became constant, bringing fear and suffering to both of them. The consequences of these acts were astonishing and almost extreme. In today's story, we will find out how Jessica ended up in the mansion of an elderly man and what she found in the barn behind the house, something that would change her life forever. One night, Lisa was cooking dinner while little Jessica played with her dolls in the living room. It was past the time her father usually came home, so the girl went to the kitchen to ask her mother when he would come home from work. Lisa smiled and asked her daughter to be patient, explaining that her father was involved in a big project and needed to work harder to bring money home. He would come back as soon as he could. But that night, the hours passed and no sign of his return. Lisa tried to stay calm, but felt a palpitation in her chest that grew more and more intense. When the phone rang, Lisa rushed to answer. Jessica went to her mother, hoping it was her father calling to say he would stay late at work. However, the girls saw her mother's expression change, becoming terrified. Lisa began to cry and sob. It wasn't John, her husband, who was on the phone, but his boss, informing him of a tragedy. John had died in a workplace accident at the factory where he worked. He fell from a scaffolding, could not hold on, and fell from a height of 10 meters. John's burial was forever etched in Jessica's memory. The guilt-filled eyes of her co-workers, the despair of her friends, and the silence of Lisa, who was too dejected to show any other reaction. For Jessica, it was as if none of this was real, as if at some point she was going to wake up from a nightmare. But Jessica wasn't dreaming, and the reality was even harsher. She only accepted her father's death much later. Lisa and Jessica's life became a constant struggle to support themselves. Lisa tried valiantly not to let anything be missing at home and to continue paying the rent, but the income was not enough for all the needs. Mother and daughter were forced to cut expenses drastically, living with the minimum necessary. It was during this difficult period that Lisa met Jack, a man 15 years her senior. She was attracted to him and saw in him a lifeline. Jack convinced her to move with him to a town in Oregon, where he had a steady job and a home of his own. With no prospect of improvement, Lisa concluded that she had nothing to lose. So, he took Jessica and her belongings and moved into Jack's house. Lisa had no idea what awaited her in the new state, with a man she had known for such a short time. Although Jack had told the truth about the house in Oregon, a good property for the three of them, he omitted that he suffered from alcoholism. Maybe he had forgotten to mention it or just didn't want to admit that he had a drinking problem. The more time passed, the more Jack got drunk and lost control. Lisa endured as long as she could, trying to help him, but it was hard to convince Jack that he had a problem. In addition, when he drank, Jack resorted to violence, often using his fists to validate his arguments. Sometimes he just broke objects in the room, other times he really hurt Lisa, and sometimes it was even left for Jessica, who grew up more and more silent and shy. Jessica knew something bad was about to happen. The consequences were inevitable. Over the years, abuse at home caused Lisa to develop health problems. One night, after another fight with Jack, Lisa felt sharp pains in her chest. Jessica, who was already 15 years old at the time, called an ambulance. Lisa resisted until rescue arrived, but despite the efforts of doctors, they were unable to contain the heart attack that ended up taking her life. In a matter of minutes, Jessica became an orphan, living in the home of an unbalanced and dangerous man. Without Lisa around, Jack began to drink even more, turning the young woman's life into a real hell. Jessica lived this way for 3 years, not knowing what to do to change her situation, and not knowing who to turn to. She kept a backpack ready in case she needed to leave in a hurry, but she had nowhere to go and suspected that the authorities would not pay much attention to her case. In recent months, Jack began to look at Jessica strangely and said things that made her even more uncomfortable. Fearing that the situation would get worse, Jessica sent a message to her friend Kate, telling her everything she was going through. Kate supported her and offered to help. That same afternoon, Jack came home from work and drank more than usual, becoming even more aggressive. At the height of his madness, he forced the door of the room where Jessica was standing until she gave in. He pounced on the girl, but she was faster and managed to escape, leaving Jack furious and with a bloody nose from a fall. Jessica grabbed her emergency backpack and ran through the front door, leaving Jack behind, drunk and shouting insults. That night, Jessica didn't look back. She knew she couldn't just live in Kate's house, so she started looking for a job the next day. At first, no one wanted to hire a young woman with no experience, but she persisted and got a job as a hostess in a restaurant. Jessica adapted well to her new tasks at the restaurant and soon caught the attention of the regulars of the place. William, a student at one of the country's top universities, was especially delighted with the new employee. He was used to always getting what he wanted, and when he saw Jessica, he decided he would give the world to her. He struck up a conversation, continued to frequent the restaurant and always praised her work. Within months, they began dating seriously, and Jessica became a frequent visitor to William's house. The problem is that William's father never liked Jessica since the first meeting and did not miss the opportunity to remind his son of the social differences between them. The fact that Jessica didn't have parents or other family members to take care of her weighed heavily on him. William's father thought the relationship could last for a while, but the idea of marriage or children made him uncomfortable. This got even worse when Jessica announced that she was pregnant. William, although he feared his family's reaction, had no choice but to tell everyone about the pregnancy. Jessica moved into William's house, where they planned that she would stay at least for the duration of her pregnancy. William hoped that the child's arrival would improve his father's relationship with Jessica, but the situation only worsened. When their daughter, Emma, was born, the relationship in the family remained strained. For the next 3 years, William finished college and got a job at a large firm in the city. With that, all the responsibility of taking care of Emma fell on Jessica, who also had to deal with her father-in-law's constant criticism and reproach. He even stated, once, that Emma looked nothing like William, insinuating that the child was not his granddaughter. Jessica, though deeply hurt, chose not to fight back, focusing instead on caring for Emma. The final blow came when Jessica discovered that William was having an affair with her boss at the firm. He didn't even make a point of hiding it, since his boss, an older woman, had promised to help him advance in his career. This was another blow to Jessica, who was already tired of so many trials. Without giving any explanations, Jessica packed her emergency backpack once again and returned to her friend Kate's house, now with Emma in her arms. Kate took Jessica in again, but they both knew they couldn't stay there for long. Jessica needed to find a place of her own and a way to support her daughter. With so many worries and a small child to take care of, Jessica ended up accepting the old position as a receptionist at the restaurant. However, the work that was once quiet now became a challenge, as she was exhausted, torn between work and caring for Emma. One day, an elderly man named Oliver came into the restaurant. The owner of the place, noticing that the man seemed drunk, asked him to leave. Oliver was pale, with his hand on his chest, and seemed to be suffocating. Unable to express himself, he fainted. While the other customers and employees looked on in confusion, Jessica acted quickly and called an ambulance. Thanks to his quick action and the competence of the rescue team, Oliver survived the scare. Fully recovered, Oliver returned to the restaurant to thank the young receptionist who had saved his life. When talking to Jessica, he was moved to hear about the difficulties she faced. The next day, Oliver returned to the restaurant with an offer. "I live alone in a mansion and I have no children or wife. Come live with me, you and Emma can stay as long as you need." Jessica thought about the offer for some time and decided to accept. Oliver made some changes to the mansion and left a part of the house for Jessica and Emma to live as if it were their own property. Emma enjoyed Oliver and the vast space to play and explore. However, Oliver's health was no longer the same as it was years ago. 3 months later, he suffered another sudden illness. Sensing that life was leaving him, Oliver held Jessica's hands and revealed a secret. "Under the house, in the basement, behind my tool bag, you'll find a box. Everything inside her now belongs to you and Emma." Desperate, Jessica tried to revive Oliver and called an ambulance. Despite the efforts of the doctors, Oliver's health was very poor, and he would need to be operated on urgently. The surgery was expensive, and Jessica didn't have the money to do it. Remembering Oliver's words about the basement, Jessica ran to see what he had left. It was the first time Jessica had gone down to the basement. She turned on the lights and found the tools on an old table, but she didn't see any boxes. After searching more closely, he found a box covered in dust on the floor. Inside it, there was an old cloth surrounding a volume. While unwrapping the cloth, Jessica found small rough diamond stones. She knew right then and there how she would pay for Oliver's surgery. Later, Jessica discovered that Oliver had obtained the rough diamonds from his son, who had disappeared years earlier in a mine in Alaska. Oliver believed that diamonds were cursed and kept them a secret, especially after his wife's death. But in Jessica's hands, the stones proved to be a true blessing, granting Oliver another chance at life. During the time he had left, Oliver was like a grandfather to Emma and treated Jessica like a daughter, being the caring father she hasn't had since she was a child. In the end, despite all the difficulties and trials, none of them were destined for unhappiness or loneliness.